As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
Taiwan confirms that U.S. troops are in Kinmen. And if you remember where Kinmen is a group of Taiwanese-controlled islands that are on the coast of mainland China, just a few miles from the coast of mainland China. Taiwanese Defense Minister Xu Kuo-cheng confirmed on Thursday the presence of U.S. Army Special Forces soldiers in Kinmen, and some parts of the Kinmen Islands are just 2.5 miles away from the mainland Chinese city of Xiamen, just 2.5 miles away. And the presence of U.S. troops on these islands was first reported by Taiwanese media last month. If you remember, I covered it because this is a big deal. I mean, you try to put the shoe on the other foot in these scenarios. I can't think of anything comparable, I guess, besides Chinese troops being right over the border in Canada or Mexico or something like that. So Chu confirmed the highly provocative deployment when he was asked about a new report from the U.S. outlet SOFREP that said U.S. Green Berets have taken up permanent positions as military advisors in Kinmen. The U.S. soldiers are also deployed in Penghui, which is a Taiwanese-controlled archipelago about 30 miles west of Taiwan and 70 miles east of mainland China. So further away than Kinmen, obviously, but still not too far across the Taiwan Strait. So this new report from this U.S. outlet, SOFREP, said that the U.S. Green Berets were stationed at the Taiwanese Army's amphibious command centers and that this deployment was carried out under provisions in the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, which called for the U.S. to create a comprehensive training program for the Taiwanese military. The new collaboration includes the U.S. troops training Taiwanese forces on the Black Hornet Nano, which is a compact military drone. So these drones are really small. They can fit in the palm of your hand. So that's just the only example, really, of the type of training that they're doing. So Taiwan's defense minister said that the presence of the U.S. Green Berets was a learning opportunity for Taiwan's military. So this follows a pattern of the U.S. increasing its support for Taiwan, its troop deployments to Taiwan. And I mean, this is just, again, like, what is the purpose of this besides just being incredibly provocative, just to be a tripwire for a potential war? Because if China does decide to invade Taiwan or attack Taiwan, the battle is going to open probably on these islands. And there were battles over these islands in the 1950s during the first and second Taiwan Strait crisis. And during those, the U.S. intervened and sent its Navy fleet through the Taiwan Strait. So there's a history here. And it's just, I don't know, it just seems reckless and insane to me, and it doesn't get much media attention. That's why I wanted to make it the top story here. Israeli military announced that it plans to relocate the 1.5 million Palestinians taking refuge in Rafah to what they call humanitarian islands. So this is from Israel's chief military spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari. He said, quote, "We need to make sure that 1.4 million people, or at least a significant amount of the 1.4 million, will move. Where? To humanitarian islands that we will create with the international community," end quote. So it looks like they're saying that they're going to clear Rafah out and forcibly move these people. Where exactly is not clear. And this sounds like, they said that they'll create this with the international community. That sounds like they want the U.S. to pay for whatever this sort of plan is. And then, of course, there's the risk of Israel bombing these areas anyway, as they have bombed many of these areas that they have deemed as so-called safe zones. So Houthi leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi vowed on Thursday that the Yemeni group would expand its targeting of Israel-linked commercial shipping to hit vessels in the Indian Ocean that are trying to get around the Red Sea. Al-Houthi said, quote, "Our main battle is to prevent ships linked to the Israeli enemy from passing through not only the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, and the Gulf of Aden, but also the Indian Ocean towards the Cape of Good Hope. This is a major step, and we have begun to implement our operations related to it," end quote. So this goes to show, I'm not sure the range of Houthi missiles, how far in the Indian Ocean that they can hit, because he's talking about ships that will go around below Africa, around the Cape of Good Hope, to avoid the Red Sea. But this goes to show how this new U.S. bombing campaign against the Houthis has done nothing to deter them. And, they keep escalating their attacks on commercial shipping. And And U.S. officials have acknowledged that they don't know how much damage they're doing to the Houthis. They really have no idea. But despite the lack of success, they continue to bomb Yemen. There was fresh U.S. airstrikes, 11 U.S. airstrikes reported in Yemen's Hodeidah province on Thursday. There were some strikes the day before as well. Al-Houthi said that U.S. military action will not stop them from supporting Gaza, and he vowed that the attacks would continue until the Israeli onslaught in Gaza comes to an end, and that is what the Houthis, or Ansar Allah, have said this whole time. And he also said that the U.S. and British involvement is only going to widen the conflict and war at the regional level. Al-Houthi also said that 34 Houthis have been killed since Ansar Allah began targeting Israel-linked commercial shipping in response to the slaughter in Gaza. And according to the Yemen Data Project, at least 1 civilian was killed and 10 have been wounded by U.S. and British airstrikes.
Here's Gerald Salenti with today's trends in the news.
Markets today were down. Wholesale inflation went up higher than they thought. Gold prices went down. Oil. You got Brent crude now at about $85 a barrel. What happened? Ukraine attacked a major oil refinery in Russia. Read your Trends Journal. Week after 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 week. It's a weekly. The grand total of $2.56 a week. Basically nothing. And again, golden year for gold. One of your top trends, World War III. Top trends, EV, go FU, all on the mark. So, going back to oil. We've been warning that oil prices are going to escalate dramatically as, not if, as the Middle East and Ukraine war keeps expanding. And our warning or forecasting that with Ukraine losing the dough that they need, they're going to ramp up attacks inside Russia. There you got it. And you haven't seen anything yet as the Israel war keeps expanding, which we will get back to. And gold prices took a bit of a hit today, but they're still way up there, and we see them staying up. So here's your deal. Inflation is going up as economies are going down. Japan, UK, Germany in recession. Again, inflation's going up. It is not stagflation. The economies are going down. We are going to go through a period of dragflation. I'm not talking about, LGBT. I'm not talking about that kind of drag, Dragflation meaning economies go down and inflation goes up. U.S. finds spare cash to provide weaponry to Ukraine. The numbers are between $300 and $400 million. Spare cash. EU, $5 billion to fund arms for Kyiv. Anyway, it keeps going on. Detainees from Gaza say Israelis stripped and beat them. This is a whole big article in the Wall Street Journal. The atrocities that are being committed. Hey, but America, that's okay. We got Guantanamo. This is nothing. Come on. What are you going after them for? And as I said, and as we warned with one of our top trends for 2023, Middle East meltdown, when we warned that this would happen this year, Israel's clashes with Hezbollah intensify. This is from the Financial Times. Cross-border fire between Israel and Hezbollah has escalated sharply as Israeli jets twice struck targets deep inside Lebanon in the past 48 hours. This is yesterday being reported. You ready? And the militant group responded with a single largest barrage of rockets since the start of the hostilities in October. Militants responded. Okay. Israel bombs the shit out of Lebanon, and the people of Lebanon respond to getting bombed, and they're called militants. And that's why you subscribe to the Trends Journal. We're not media whores they get paid to put out by the corporate pimps and the government whoremasters. How disgusting to write like this. How disgusting to write like this. How about they retaliated? Hey, in the Bronx, we used to say, payback's a bitch. You bastards. Oh, Neri Ziba in Tel Aviv reported on this. Yeah, okay, there you go. China calls for immediate ceasefire as Gaza conflict defies Ramadan. This is from the Global Times. I want to read this. Quote, the killing of Gaza civilians must stop. The injustice toward the Palestinian people must be corrected. And the double standards in dealing with human rights and international humanitarian law must be abandoned. The longer the flames of Gaza flare up, the more the humanity is scourged by conscience, the more the cornerstone of justice is eroded. And that was according to their foreign minister. Perfectly true. And Poland's foreign minister confirms NATO troops are in Ukraine. And as I said, Poland says that we have to prepare for the next war. And Poland, the biggest army in the EU, and they go on to say that the Polish minister said this week that he said, quote, several NATO countries already have their troops in Ukraine. This is Guy Sikorsky. He said the West should pursue the policy of asymmetrical escalation in Ukraine. And then in the Wall Street Journal today, Putin rattles nuclear saber. He's saying, if it's going to go nuclear, we're going to go nuclear. Again, World War III has begun. People have no clue about how bad it is. China, Iran, Russia, this is the Global Times of China, launched joint drills near Gulf of Oman. Safeguard regional maritime security. China warns of conflict over U.S. push for major country contest. Keeps going on.
This story that just came out is what got me thinking about this. So let's go to Rand Paul's tweet.
I don't believe today, as I'm sitting here, that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee in 2024. Don't believe it.
I don't think it's helpful for the President of the United States to attack the media. It's petty, and it's certainly below the stature of the office of the President of the United States. It's beneath the office in and of itself.
Actions and activities unbecoming of the office of the President of the United States.
All right. So this is, of course, Mike Rogers. You saw some clips there from my old show, SEC Cups, Unfiltered. So why is Rand Paul playing this video of Mike Rogers? Because Donald Trump just came out and endorsed him. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, is Donald Trump just saying that a corrupt CIA stooge of a senator is better than a corrupt CIA stooge who's a Democrat? So he's just picking the Republican because they're that's his team and maybe they're a little bit better on the margins than a Democrat? No, he's doing this in Mike Rogers' primary against Justin Amash, who's also seeking the Senate seat. Now, Justin Amash is 500 trillion million times better than Mike Rogers. And anyone who knows the first thing about anything cannot deny that. But Justin Amash, and while I'll be the first one to admit he was wrong for this, but he voted for impeachment, Donald Trump. He came out after the Mueller investigation or something and said he was guilty of obstruction of justice. Now, that was a bad take by Justin Amash. I'm not defending him on that. But aside from that, his voting record in the House was so good. I mean, he's easily one of the greatest congressmen to ever live. I would probably rank, I would certainly rank Ron Paul as number one. I think Thomas Massey might take that number 2 slot, but Justin Amash is right there arguing for number 3. I mean, he's up there amongst the greatest congressmen to ever live. But he hurt Donald Trump's ego. He came out against Donald Trump. And so Donald Trump, and you know, Rob, this is not because he thinks Rogers is better for the country than Justin Amash. There's no chance that that's the case. But he'll come out against him. So we could have one of the greatest congressmen in the history of this country in the Senate. We could have another Rand Paul in the Senate. But the most influential right-winger in America by far is going to come out and try to make it so we don't have that because his ego is hurt. And that's who Donald Trump is. In a nutshell, you could not sum him up better than that. So no, thank you. I'm not going to support that. Look, I live in a little country town. My town's red, but I live in a blue state. And it's a foregone conclusion who's going to win my state anyway. My vote is just a protest vote anyway. So if I'm going to protest vote, let me at least protest vote for something I actually believe in. Protest vote for this guy who's going to try. Literally, look, I'm not saying adding one more Rand Paul in the Senate saves our country tomorrow. But yeah, it maybe pulls that car back from 110 miles an hour to 109 miles an hour. Like, okay, that's at least something. We at least get one more good senator in there. But no, you're going to work against that just because it's not glorifying your ego, which is, by the way, all this whole thing is about anyway. It's the whole thing, right? I didn't lose last time. I won last time. And now I got to go show everybody that I won and we're going to win again. And then he'll talk about how we won. Nobody thought we were going to win, but we won. It'll just be that. So anyway, that in a nutshell is my response to that. I'm not making the perfect the enemy of the good. I'm just saying, show me the good. I need something before I could be convinced to do this.
Well, I guess that Rogers guy trashed him too, so he's picking between who was trashing him.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So to speak to your point, I mean, he put deep state kooks in once he got in there. He ousted his team and he replaced him with all your war hungry Boltons and other individuals. With that said, and I agree with you, if you're in a state that's going in one direction anyways, voting for the Libertarian Party to get counted as, hey, these are the ideals that I care more about is probably better for representation because it puts some numbers to how many people care about these ideas. And, you know, as they start trying to plan for other elections and research what ideas they need to actually platform, higher numbers for that is important. With that said, I really hope that Biden loses and he loses big. And I do think that Trump does I agree with you. Trump's probably going to put bad war people into his cabinet. I think on some of these huge issues such as Israel, he's going to be no better. Yeah. But I do think when it comes in rolling back bad investments in green energy, when it comes to pushing the woke agenda, when it comes to internet free speech and talking to the networks directly to try and deplatform people like us, and when it comes to trying to push things like a central bank digital currency, I think on some of these other, which are more just national issues, Trump is definitely better than Biden. And
I will agree that he's less worse than Biden on several issues. I don't know that his own deep state may not be trying to do a lot of this stuff even when Donald Trump's in there. I think we've clearly established they don't work for him even when he's president. But you are right. There's areas in terms of energy regulation, he was much better than Joe Biden. He did get some tax cuts in there that were good. Would have liked to see them more. It's a lot steeper and on this particularly on the individual side.
Didn't spend any less.
Yeah. So government spending, he was atrocious. It was an absolute disaster.
Tomorrow in history, March 16th, I believe 1751, James Madison was born. So we're celebrating James Madison's birthday. And I know many people know him as the father of the Constitution, but it seems like very few people know his actual views on the Constitution and how to enforce it. And so for that, on this episode, we say happy birthday with a dirty dozen. For me, I've got my top 12 favorite quotes, at least for today, from Madison himself. From Federalist number 45, which I think is his best overview of the entire structure of the Constitution itself. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. This is a precursor, really, to what we got with the 10th Amendment. And proponents of the Constitution throughout the ratification debates explain the meaning of these various phrases. Now, there was some debate over them, but James Madison discussed many of them throughout his career, during ratification and well after as well. So, for example, let's look at some of the big clauses that are used, misused, and abused more than any others, like the General Welfare Clause. Here's Madison in the House of Representatives in 1792. He said, "It would be absurd to say that Congress may do what they please." And that's how people who love power have always treated clauses like this. They're looking at general welfare and they say, well, we can do whatever the heck we want. But Madison said that would be absurd. He said, in fact, the meaning of the general terms in question must either be sought in the subsequent enumerations which limits and details them, or they convert the government from one limited as hitherto supposed to the enumerated powers into a government without any limits at all. So to treat the General Welfare Clause as the anything everything clause is to give them unlimited power. Now, discussing commerce, here's a letter to Joseph C. Cabell. He said, "It is very certain that it grew out of the abuse of the power by the importing states in taxing the non-importing, and it was intended as a negative and preventative provision against injustice among the states themselves, rather than as a power to be used for the positive purposes of the general government." This was not a tool to give the general or federal government a bunch of power over our everyday lives. We also have the Necessary and Proper Clause. Here's his speech, one of his speeches opposing the First National Bank. He said, "Whatever meaning this clause may have, none can be admitted that would give an unlimited discretion to Congress. Its meaning must, according to the natural and obvious force of the terms and the context, be limited to means necessary to the end and incident to the nature of the specified powers." Madison here is telling the people who understood this very well, at least at the time, that the Necessary and Proper Clause was based on the legal doctrine of principles and incidents. We've got a whole episode that we'll be linking to in the show notes discussing Madison's views on necessary and proper. And he wrapped up Federalist number 48 with this: "A mere demarcation on parchment of the constitutional limits of the several departments is not a sufficient guard against those encroachments which lead to a tyrannical concentration of all the powers of government in the same hands." And he discusses who has the final say on this. In his report of 1800, discussing the Alien and Sedition Acts and the resolutions of Virginia passed in response to them in 1798. And he points out that the Constitution was formed by the sanction of the states, given by each in its sovereign capacity. And he also points out in this report that you can define the word states in many ways, including state governments, a particular land mass. But he says states in this capacity, it means the people composing those political societies in their highest sovereign capacity. Sovereignty means final authority to the founding generation. And Madison is saying that the people of the several states in their highest sovereign capacity, they are the ones that form the Constitution of the United States. And he said, the states then being the parties to the constitutional compact and in their sovereign capacity, it follows of necessity that there can be no tribunal above their authority to decide in the last resort whether the compact made by them be violated. Turning to the government, the creation, to determine if it violated the rules that the people of the several states gave to it when they created it, is a guarantee that that government power will always grow and grow and grow. Now, Madison didn't necessarily say you had to make this decision, this call in the states on every issue, but he certainly said in the last resort, they're the ones to decide, the people of the several states. And going back to his Virginia resolutions of 1798, he described it like this. In case of a deliberate, palpable, and dangerous exercise of other powers not granted by the said compact, the states who are parties thereto have a right and are in duty bound to interpose for arresting the progress of the evil and for maintaining within their respective limits the authorities, rights, and liberties appertaining to them. So to stop the feds, James Madison also told us all the way back in Federalist number 46 during the ratification debate 1788, he said very similar. He said that you have to have a disobedience by the people, outspoken governors, use state legislative devices, and, quote, a refusal to cooperate with officers of the Union. Now, he described things, there's different strategies for every specific issue. You can't apply the exact same thing in the exact same way, but certainly we know that according to James Madison in Federalist 46, in the Virginia resolutions, again, in his report of 1800, that going to the government to convince the government to stop doing what the government was never supposed to do in the first place is not how you deal with usurpations of power. It's really ultimately up to the people of the states to get the job done. And he said the right of nullification meant by Mr. Jefferson is the natural right, which all admit to be a remedy against insupportable oppression. So the right of nullification is not something that you get from a document. You don't have to get permission from anyone. This is a natural right. It's a revolutionary right in some ways as well. And everyone, he's saying, everyone at the time of the founding actually admitted that this would be a remedy against insupportable oppression. This is also from his report of 1800. Again, all this will be linked to in the show notes at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. He said the powers not given to the government were withheld from it, and that if any doubt could have existed on this subject under the original text of the Constitution, it is removed as far as words could remove it by the 12th Amendment, which is now the 10th Amendment, now a part of the Constitution, which expressly declares that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people.
Well, thank you, Dr. Paul. And you should be a very proud father because Senator Rand Paul really is a champion of our civil liberties, the Bill of Rights. When it's the big stuff, when the rubber hits the road, he is always there, even by himself, defending us. And this week he said, regarding this TikTok, great quote, emulating Chinese communism is not the way to combat Chinese communism. What a radical idea. Don't be a commie yourself. Now, personally, I don't think Chinese communism has to be battled at all. What do I care? I'm 6,000 miles away. I'm an American. What do I care what kind of government they have all the way across the world? Let each nation choose their own form of government. I definitely don't want our government to be communist. And thank goodness, even though they're leaning in that direction, they're not communists. And I don't really care if San Francisco or New York City, if they want to live the way they live, knock yourself out. And so this whole battling communism is not really necessary. And if you look, like Dr. Paul said, if you look at China, they're pretty much communist in name only. They are some of the biggest, most powerful capitalists in the world. Now, we Americans, we're the capitalists. That's pretty much in name only. We're some of the biggest socialists in the world. But the point that Rand is making, and it's a wonderful point, is you're not going to defeat this bad ideology by adopting it yourself. You're going to censor people. You're going to, give the president this terrible power of saying they're foreign influence. That's it. Censor them. Even though 100 million Americans use their service, And this whole idea that China is coming to get us, when you look at a map, China is surrounded by U.S. military bases. Are we surrounded by Chinese military bases? Not at all. If anybody should be worried, it's them. And we say over and over, bring our troops home, bring our troops home. But, the American people are so propagandized that this is a very tough battle to fight. To advocate for freedom, that's why Rand is largely alone, because the propaganda is so effective on the American people that they think that they have the right to go tell people all the way around the world how they should live.
If you believe, or a lot of people do sincerely and even mistakenly, that Israel's losing this PR fight here, what's going on, and the Palestinians have gained. They have larger crowds coming out, and it is an issue. It's not going to be silenced easily. So they are saying, well, what do? We have to silence them. That's not dealing with the problem. Why has there been, this war going on in the Middle East for decades, if not years, many years? And it's going to continue because outsiders are trying to settle it instead of the people that live there. But that is a big problem. But when Rand got into that thing last night with Fox, it was interesting to know that one person I happened to listen to, I didn't listen to everything that was on the internet this morning, but Sink Uyghur, who's a commentator. He happens to be a progressive, and I've been interviewed by him. And I always believed he was fair in his interview, but he came to Rand's defense. So because he admitted, he said, well, tactics might be off a little bit. I wouldn't have done it the same way. But he said Rand's absolutely correct on this, and it's a First Amendment issue. So that's worth looking at because it gives a lot of information, and that's in a video that's on the TV today. But I think the people are lining up and they have to demonize somebody. And right now they have been working very hard at it to demonize China, of course, Russia, and this will add fuel to the fire and make it even worse. But if you ever look at one of Rand's points was he had a lot of trouble with kill meat on Fox. He says, who do you think owns it? And Rand had a list of the stockholders that owned it, and they weren't all, and none of them were Chinese officials. There were even Americans owned some of this stock. So that's really what counts. So this is a game they play because they have to demonize people both for the money, because right now they're arguing, will they get money for the Middle East war? Are they going to get money for Ukraine? Are they going to get money for our border security here? Well, so far the two foreign benefits seem to have more strength and more likely to get it. But my guess is they're going to get into this is just a wild guess that they're going to get into this final stage, and they know they have to have this money passed. And I think they'll give it to the whole thing. They'll throw a token of it to the United States, as if we're the losers. The other three countries, Taiwan will get money and all, but we don't want to fund the wall, and that's where the real conflict is. But I just sort of think the way they do things up there is they'll at least give you the image that they took care of everybody and everybody's happy. But the more difficulties that we get into because of the bankruptcy we have and the bankruptcy of our ideas, the less likely it will be to just paper it over, give them more money, give everybody money. Not when you have a debt of $34 trillion and playing havoc with our middle class and the poor. That spells trouble, and it's coming quickly.
And we live in a disordered nation. It's sad to see. It's sad to see our nation go down like this, but it is a reflection of disordered individuals. COVID was a big wake-up call to see the types of people that we live around. There's a lot of petty tyrants out there that were ready to stick a mask on you, weren't letting you in the house unless you took a shot that didn't work. I mean, we have a lot of petty tyrants that live under this big disordered tyranny that lives in Washington. So the place to start is on our own lives, get our own lives in order as best as we can, and at best, you can set an example for other people to try to mimic you. And that's what our nation should do. At best, try to set an example for China and Vietnam and South Korea. Just set an example, and maybe they'll adopt what you're doing. This idea of you being a busybody and you're going to try to control them is failing. We're bankrupting ourselves. So it's time to turn around and get back to first principles, like Dr. Paul said. It's very simple. It's in the U.S. Constitution, and it's in the Bill of Rights.